Welcome to Fire and Emergency Services Instructor, Chapter 9, Testing and Evaluation. Learning Objective 1, we're going to discuss two ways to assess a student's success. Evaluation is the last step in the four-step method of instruction and is accomplished through observation and testing. The purpose of student evaluations and testing is to determine how well students have learned and retained the course material. While evaluation is often used to assign grades or scores, it should also result in feedback for students that gives students a clear idea of what they have learned and what they still need to learn. Evaluating student progress or performance requires a stated performance criterion. To determine whether this criterion has been met, instructors must either observe students directly or use testing instruments. This chapter focuses on the formal evaluation and testing duties of Level 1 instructors as defined in NFPA 1041, the standard for fire service instructor professional qualifications. Level 1 instructors should understand the following categories: the approaches to student assessment, test classifications, test bias, test administration, test scoring, grade reporting, test security, evaluation / feedback. Certification examinations are intended to determine mastery of a subject or topic. To pass these exams, students must have a complete and thorough knowledge of the subject and the ability to recall and apply the knowledge. Assessing or evaluating student success may be accomplished either through norm-referenced or criterion-referenced assessment. These types of assessments are described in the following sections. Norm-referenced assessment measures the accomplishment of one student against that of another. At the end of an instructional unit, an exam is given and the results are scored. The scores are translated into grades, often based on the distribution of scores. In most instances, the distribution is arranged in a bell curve, with the majority of scores in the middle and a much smaller number of exceptional scores at the high and lower ends of the range. Here's an example of your norm reference assessments, the bell curve. You can see that 20% are below average, 20% are above average, and then we've got 60% in the middle. This type of assessment is used for some evaluations of the fire service and emergency services, particularly in cases where clear differentiations are made between top performers and others. For example, norm-referenced assessments are commonly used during promotional testing and determining ranking in recruit academies. It also compares performance with criteria. Any performance is considered acceptable as long as it meets the conditions stated in the criteria. Primarily used where many students can succeed at the same level, such as in a classroom or skills training setting. Test scores translate to either a passing or failing grade, depending on whether the student has met or failed to meet the criteria. For example, if the criterion for performance on an end of instruction exam is 70%, any grade of 70 or higher is a pass, while anything below 70 is a no pass fail. A similar approach may be used to evaluate psychomotor skills, in which the student either passes or fails a manipulative skills test. Using a skills checklist and a timer, Instructors can assess whether students have completed the skill quickly and accurately enough. If they do, they pass. But if they do not, they fail. A single step may be so critical, incorrect performance may result in a failing grade. Learning objective 2. Let's identify the 6 classifications of tests. Both criterion referenced and norm referenced tests can be divided into more specific classifications based on the reason for testing and the way the test is administered. No single test type is suitable for every situation. Our 2 types: purpose classification, the reason for testing; administration classification, the way the test is administered. Prescriptive tests are given at the beginning of instruction to establish a student's current level of knowledge in order to compare it to a subsequent summative evaluation. When the test contents are the same or similar in both iterations, comparing the 2 scores measures the amount of learning that has occurred. Formative tests may be quizzes, pop tests, or question-answer periods that are given throughout the course or session. These tests typically measure improvement within a small scope of the class progression and give the instructor and students feedback on learning progress. When measuring improvement, the test answers the question: is the student achieving the objectives? Formative tests can include the most important learning objectives or all of them if possible. Each test item should be designed to a level of difficulty that matches the learning objective it is meant to measure. Doing so helps to ensure that the test is criterion referenced. Summative tests measure comprehensive knowledge and skills at the end of a course or of a major segment of the course. These tests answer the question: has the student achieved the course objectives? Examples of comprehensive tests would be the written and/or practical exams given at the midpoint or end of emergency medical technician, basic firefighting, or driver operator courses. Students who are tested must demonstrate comprehensive knowledge and skills relating to all material from the beginning of the course to the testing point. Administration classification. Based on how the test is administered and includes oral, written, and performance tests. The Level 2 instructor or the authority having jurisdiction's SOPs may assign this type of test based on the type of learning that is being evaluated. The Level 1 instructor may be assigned to administer any of these types of tests. Oral tests. Students give verbal answers to spoken questions during a one-on-one interaction with the instructor. Not commonly used in the fire and emergency services, but may be useful under certain circumstances, such as determining a student's understanding at the end of the lesson. Administering and scoring oral tests should follow an established scoring rubric. Instructors must listen carefully to student responses in order to prevent misunderstanding and be careful not to make facial expressions that might confuse or mislead students. We should rarely be used as the sole means of determining the student's terminal performance for a course or course segment. Written tests evaluate if students have met cognitive learning objectives from the lesson plan. Useful for measuring retention and understanding of technical subjects such as fire chemistry, laws and ordinances, hydraulic principles, and medical protocols. Written test question types. We can have multiple choice questions. We can have true or false. we can have matching questions, fill in the blank completion questions, short answer, and essays. Administering written tests, reading tests aloud, providing students a sheet of questions, or electronic media are our three most common ways of doing written tests. Performance tests. This measures the student's ability to perform skills and tasks as they would on the job, based on standardized criteria and performance objectives. Students are tested on their current ability to complete the skill. Performance test administration preparation. Let's determine the materials, tools, or equipment that students must have available to perform the skills or activities, and that they are available and in working order. Prepare a skill sheet along with appropriate time limits for each of the steps necessary to perform the skill. Determine the number of test evaluators needed to observe and measure the performances of the students. Review the operation of unfamiliar equipment with all instructors and test evaluators. Learning Objective 3, we're going to discuss test bias. Test bias is serious business. A test is considered biased when members of different groups, age, culture, and ethnic background or gender, with the same ability level, routinely are scored different on tests. Bias can be difficult to prove because tests are designed to discriminate between those that know the information in the test and those that do not. Bias is an indication that the test puts one particular group or person at a disadvantage to another. We as Level 1 instructors have an obligation to eliminate testing bias wherever we can. The best way to eliminate bias is to recognize it and to request that potentially biased questions be rewritten or more closely examined. Level 1 instructors may find biases in tests that have any of the following qualities. Gender references are all from the same gender. He, she. Ethnic references are stereotypical and or irrelevant to the test. Cultural references do not reflect the cultural knowledge of the likely testing group or are irrelevant to the test. Regional jargon or dialects used in the questions could put students from a different region at a disadvantage. Terminology and vocabulary in the test are unfamiliar to the students taking the test. In legal terms, certification, skills tests, and promotional tests are grouped together under the larger title employment tests or selection tests. Typically, employment tests are either entry tests for getting a job or tests for reaching a promotion after training. In the United States, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, better known as the EEOC, has the responsibility of investigating any bias on employment tests. In order to avoid any legal liability, Level 1 instructors should follow any scoring rubrics and answer keys that have been provided to them. They should also teach to the lesson objectives in provided lesson plans. Learning Objective 4. Describe the process of test administration. Regardless of the platform or medium used to present a test, test administration begins before the test is given. Instructors should inform students what type of test they will take, what content from the lesson plan it will cover, the location of the test environment, and which materials they will need to bring, i.e. paper, pencil, pen, notes, books, PPE. The course syllabus should also contain the dates and times of major tests and periodic quizzes. On the day of the test, the instructor should consider the physical environment of the test location, making sure that the students have the following. Do we have appropriate lighting, comfortable seating, quiet surroundings, regulated temperature, proactive responses to performance barriers? Instructors should adhere to the following guidelines when administering written tests. Let's ask the testing organization or AHJ to determine whether there are specific instructions or protocols for administering the test. Let's arrive at the testing location an appropriate amount of time before testing begins. Maintain test security at all times. Arrange the classroom seating when necessary so it is conducive for taking written tests. Eliminate loud talking or noises outside the testing room. Eliminate all potential distractions within the room. Have students place all backpacks, purses, books, and other unnecessary items out of the way or in an assigned area. Ensure that all electronic devices are turned off and secured. Inform students of expectations, including misconduct rules. Make sure that students do not bring written or electronic notes into the testing room unless these are specifically approved by the examination guidelines. Remind students to follow instructions on the answer sheet correctly. Let's watch for signs of academic misconduct, also known as cheating. Ensure that the environment remains quiet and safe for students. If students are allowed to leave the testing area to use the restroom, refreshment area, or other rehabilitation facility, make sure they do not take the test instrument or paper with them. Supplying extra paper, writing implements, and answer sheets. If possible, having testing aids on hand to assist with difficult students or situations, or to perform tasks such as handing out or collecting tests and evaluation forms. We cannot allow students to change their answers once the answer sheets have been submitted. Review the test at appropriate time with the students to clarify any objectives that may not have been understood. Maintain the security of tests and answer sheets at all times under any circumstances. Return test materials to the proper authority if another instructor will be scoring and grading them. Test security or custody is paramount. Identify answer sheets with identical incorrect answers or sequences of answers on multiple test sheets, because that is a potential indicator of some improprieties going on in the test, also known as cheating. Ensure that the subject matter of the test matches the subject matter that is being tested. Provide students with adequate practice time during class time leading up to the test date. Provide rehabilitation facilities such as restrooms or refreshment areas if needed. Ensure that tests are not biased through wording, timing, or unattainable criteria. Include all test administration rules in the test instructions. Read the instructions aloud to the students exactly as they are written. Provide students with the time limits for each test and clearly state the times for emphasis. Explain the purpose of each test. Encourage students to ask questions if they do not understand something. Give the test to each student in exactly the same manner. Record students' scores on performance checklists as each one takes the test. Do not wait until the end of the testing period to record scores. Keep all test scores confidential. Learning Objective 5. Explain the different processes of scoring and grading tests. Test scoring. Scoring is the act of identifying which answers are right and which are wrong. Scoring should always be objective and based on established criteria. Grading is the act of assigning a value to the score. Regardless of how tests are scored, the scoring method should always be indicated on the exam. Composite scoring used for criterion reference tests is based on a point system that encompasses an entire course. Written tests can be scored either manually or using an electronic scoring device. When we're manually scoring written tests, here are some guidelines. Score the same question on all the tests before proceeding to the next question on short answer or essay exams. Read through several responses before scoring essay or short answer tests. Shuffle the papers before scoring the next question after scoring one set of questions on all the tests. Do not attempt to score a large number of tests at one time. Use a checklist to identify the key points that should be addressed in each essay or short answer response. Add comments to essay or short answer questions to indicate what is missing or congratulate the student on exceptionally good work. Use lines or arrows, indicate which comments refer to which words or portions of the answer. Inform students about the meaning of scoring marks that are used in essay or short answer question tests. Scoring written test factors for distance learning courses. Classes in a distance learning format take much more preparation time for educators than the same classes in a face-to-face setting. Student improvement takes longer because feedback is not as immediate. Instructors have to provide effective and timely feedback. Scoring criteria, marking notations, and instructor comments must be clear, concise, and constructive. Scoring oral tests. Scoring oral tests depend on the purpose of the test, such as promotional exams, and the type of questions asked. The instructor should present the questions as they have been provided on the test and then follow the scoring guidelines provided. The scoring rubric for an oral test is often very similar to performance tests. Scoring can be very subjective, so instructors should closely follow scoring sheet guidelines. These list the tasks students must perform to complete the skill and assign a point value to each task. When the student completes the task, the evaluator gives the student credit for the task. In some cases, the instructor may give partial credit, and this is for the psychomotor hands-on test or performance. In the psychomotor tests, the tasks that directly relate to life or safety cannot be skipped or performed improperly. When possible, use multiple instructors or test evaluators to observe each student during the test. Students must be given a clearly stated set of objectives and the scoring criteria. Instructors should provide immediate feedback while observing the project, especially when safety is a concern. Grading fire and emergency services tests. The total number of points earned is divided by the total number of points possible to arrive at a percentage grade. Method usually applies to written tests but may be applicable to performance tests. Some situations may require students to get every test item correct in order to pass. These tests should include questions that attentive students will answer easily, as students are disadvantaged when every question on such a test has a high level of difficulty. Grading bias, assigning grades based on factors other than scores. On objective tests such as multiple choice tests, grading bias is very easy to prove and is considered unethical conduct. Instructors must be careful to follow scoring sheets on objective tests. Subjective tests are more challenging for evaluators to grade because the evaluation is open to some interpretation. Evaluators may inadvertently influence grades for students that they favor. Instructors who evaluate subjective tests should follow provided scoring rubrics and grading checklists. Should instructors feel that they are pressured to show bias towards some students or perceive that another instructor is showing bias, they should report that opinion to the authority having jurisdiction for further evaluation. Learning Objective 6. Explain the importance of accurate grade reporting. Scores must be recorded and reported in accordance with local procedures and policies. Because fire and emergency services students are graded against a set of specific criteria and not against each other, grades are recorded in individual student records and used as feedback for students. Care must be taken to accurately record the grades in student records. An instructor should follow the provided scoring guidelines to determine a final grade for the course. Students who fail to achieve the minimum required grade should not be recognized as having completed the training. Testing records are private and confidential, so only instructors, training division administrators, and the relevant student should have access to them. Testing results should be retained in individual student files for the period of time that the authority having jurisdiction requires and kept private in accordance with specific department policies and applicable laws. Grade reporting, necessary for two reasons. First, the organization must be able to prove whether a student has met the minimum requirements to effectively perform a duty or task, especially where certification is the final intended outcome of training. Second, the test results for all participants in a course provide the training division or administration with an idea of the effectiveness of the course or curriculum. Learning Objective 7. Identify guidelines to reduce academic misconduct. Test security is essential for all types of tests, and it is important to prevent academic misconduct. Guidelines for test security include following security measures when writing, duplicating, and storing test materials. Never rely solely on questions published in the textbook or study guide. Revise test questions regularly. Use secure data storage systems to prevent unauthorized access to tests or grades. Require our students to use assigned usernames in order to limit access to computer-administered tests. Number all test sheets, booklets, and answer sheets, and take inventory after each use. Use 2 or more versions of a single exam to prevent students from copying from each other during the test. Store old test sheets in a secure location and always destroy outdated testing materials. Learning Objective 8. Discuss the benefits of instructor feedback on student outcomes. Level 1 instructors must not only possess the ability to accurately record test results, they must also have the ability to interpret the subsequent data in order to gauge the students' levels of knowledge and understanding of the course topics. Instructors are encouraged to formally evaluate the test results to determine which pieces of information should be reinforced. Conducting evaluation feedback. Let's meet individually with students to discuss the test and review incorrect answers with the entire class anonymously.